Welcome to the Value Pros Show, where Value Pros get value ready. Hi, my name is Bruce Scheer, the host of the Value Pros Show. What you're about to hear is part one of our Revenue Mastery webinar series, a special three-part event for B2B revenue and value leaders navigating today's uncertain economy. In this session, titled Inside the Buyer's Mind, I'm joined by Dean Edwards, a seasoned procurement executive who's managed billions in global spend for companies like Levi Strauss, Kaiser, and Yahoo. Dean now helps sales teams better engage with procurement and become the kind of partner buyers can champion internally. I'm also joined by Todd Snelgrove, a recognized authority on value-based selling and pricing, and the former global head of value at SKF. And also with us is my co-founder and friend at valuepros.io, David Svigel, who brings deep experience building value tools that help sellers articulate and deliver measurable outcomes. In this session, we unpack how procurement teams think, especially in tight economic times. You'll learn what internal pressures they face, how decisions really get made, and what you can do as a seller to build trust, create traction, and help your buyers buy. Thank you everyone for making it to this webinar series with us. We're super excited. You're looking at four guys that have put a lot of time and energy into thinking through this. So we've all witnessed, and we were just talking about this morning, how we've moved into uncertain economic times. And all of us here have been through multiple downturns. Myself, I've been through 4, including the Asian crisis. And each time, you have this economic contraction, things happen and we need to be aware of it. And based on our collective experience, we know we're into that type of cycle yet again. And how do you respond? How do you take advantage of that or just play the best game you can based on the chips you've been dealt or the cards you've been dealt, to use that analogy? So what we did is we designed this webinar series. It's a 3-part series to focus on, because of this economic uncertainty, what's happening on the buying side, especially if you have a high consideration B2B solution. What's happening on the buy side? And we need to understand the dynamics that are occurring there. And that's where Dean Edwards, one of our speakers for today, he'll be talking about that as a former procurement leader of multiple big brands. He's got the experience to talk about what does happen. What are those internal dynamics that we can expect if we're trying to sell into firms like this with a high consideration B2B solution. The second part of our series is being led by Todd, former global head of value for SKF, and we'll be talking about how do we respond by helping our buyers buy with a business case. So how do we set that up, get buy-in towards that, and make sure we deliver on that promise when we're partnering with our buyers. So that's part 2 of this webinar series. Then the third part, that's in June. That's where the 3 of us will come back. I'll be introducing some proprietary research that valuepros.io has commissioned to look at how do we influence the buying experience. And I saw a study last year, 59% of the influence on a bold buying decision, a high consideration solution buying decision, 59% of that consideration comes from the buying experience, not from the offering. So, how can we as revenue leaders and revenue teams influence that buying experience, especially in these times of, uncertain economic, situations here that we're all facing? So that'll be round out our series, that 3-part series. So the procurement perspective is one of the things we'll get into today, the business case perspective, and then the experience perspective in June. So if you registered, and I think everybody here has, thanks for doing that, and you'll be invited to the other 2 parts of this webinar series. If you make it or not, we'll get the recordings out to you. We do have bonus materials for everybody who registered as well. So we'll send that out as a thank you and follow-up post the webinar. So let's do a quick introduction though round. I'm Bruce Scheer. I'm one of the co-founders of Value Pros, and Value Pros, we exist to help revenue teams create buyers that love them. We really want to focus on helping the revenue teams both communicate and quantify value that they're delivering on behalf of their customers. So that's Value Pros. We do that through content, tools, and enablement to help revenue teams. Dean, over to you.
Hi, I'm Dean Edwards. I've worked in many procurement organizations, as Bruce said, mainly Fortune 500 organizations, and managed up to $6 billion worth of spend for companies like Levi's, Kaiser Permanente, Yahoo, Ingram Micro. So I've seen the good and I've seen the bad, and I'm going to share with you some of those experiences today.
And then Todd?
Todd Snelgrove, experts in value and sales, marketing, pricing, based on value quantification. And one thing I learned is that procurement can be our ally if we equip them the right way. That's a key learning over the years.
Absolutely. And David?
Yeah, sure. So I'm David Svigel, a partner at Value Pros, and I bring over 20 years of experience. Bruce mentioned kind of the tools piece of Value Pros in identifying value drivers for our clients and configuring intuitive value selling tools.
Thank you, David. Awesome. Well, Dean, I'll kick it over to you. Let's get into what's happening on the buying side, the buyer's minds, those buying dynamics. Yeah.
I'm just going through a few machinations on my screen here, so if everybody can bear with me. And hopefully that's coming through for everybody. Is it, Bruce?
It's looking great. Yeah, it's looking good.
That's what I like to hear. Okay, so we're getting inside the buyer's mindset. It's about seeing today the business environment through procurement's eyes, in particular during times of revenue and supply challenges. And I really want to emphasize, if you don't understand and relate to procurement's pressure points, your value just isn't going to land with them. It's absolutely critical that you understand what's going on. So the economic uncertainty, we've got paralyzed decision-making. There was a study by Deloitte in 2024 where 74% of CPOs stated that the pressure to avoid mistakes is increasing. And you've got more players coming into the mix as the focus comes down on supply and cost issues. That just leads to an extension of the buying cycle. Right now, it's about 11.5 months as a complete buying cycle. And that really underscores the fact that delays are coming into the system. And in fact, mission critical spending, there was a study that said that 71% of IT procurement organizations are only engaging in mission critical spending. Any discretionary spend is getting shelved, and that's got huge implications for people looking to sell into new accounts. I want to start by stating there's two broad approaches to value realization. One is value capture. That's the traditional way that people view procurement. The other is value creation, and that's become more of a drive as procurement has matured as an organization over the past years. But as you enter into periods of economic uncertainty, there's lots of pressure coming down on procurement to move back down into the value capture quadrants. And it's all the old things that you've seen before, the competitive bidding, the e-auctions, the demands for free services, cash control. And I know Todd can talk extensively about the folly of cash control. And that's taken away from the real value creation that can help propel a company forward and make it successful. So huge focus on value capture coming from outside of procurement. And this chart here captures some of those dynamics for you. There's a lot of pressures coming in. There's the budget cuts, stakeholder demands, supply continuity. And that actually plays into the procurement buyer's mindset. They're asking, can they make their targets? There's huge demands being put upon them in an inflationary economy. So it's not only a case of controlling costs going up, they've been expected to drive costs down as the companies themselves face revenue challenges. They're looking to how do they defend their purchasing decisions? What will finance response be? Will they accept it? Will they challenge them aggressively? And what's their reputational risk as a consequence if something goes wrong, if finance don't agree with them? And how do they tell stakeholders no? They can't do things. They can't afford a purchase. That's a huge issue for them. That results in the ideas that are most likely to make it being those that are low risk, fully justifiable, easy to explain, and this is where sales can really, really help. And from suppliers, the ideas from suppliers that really install confidence into them. So in terms of procurement's pressure points, there's a real internal tug of war. They're expected to reduce cost, ensure supply, meet ESG targets, and not miss a beat. In a normal economy, about 40% of procurement's goals are tied to cost savings initiatives, in my experience. The others make up the balance of the 60%. That balance shifts during times of economic uncertainty, and a greater focus is put on cost savings. But there's a quid pro quo. If they're after cost reductions, how do you maintain supplier innovation? How do you set the company apart, make it competitive? If there's ESG mandates, does that slow down turnaround times? If there's a drive for compliance, does that reduce the time to actually make a decision? And if you're driving for supplier continuity, does that prevent you moving to lower cost suppliers? And if sales doesn't help lighten this load, you're actually becoming part of the problem for us. So we really need sales to come in and help us be effective. The cost control toolkit, you know all of these things. They should be familiar, fast, and believe me, procurement knows really well how to execute these things. You'll see big drives for cost savings, and this translates into more frequent bidding cycles. Particularly with digitization, procurement is accelerating the frequency with which it competitively bids requirements, all within a framework of how does it actually reduce costs year on year on year. Sometimes multiple times in a year if they see the opportunity, because they're being driven by finance and the business and the budget holders to actually free up cash so that they can effectively run the business. So as a salesperson, you need to bring a better playbook. Otherwise, procurement will be playing you with this one. And if I can't emphasize one thing enough, it's that you need to be proactive. You need to start now. You need to positively engage with procurement and show them how you can be effective in delivering value, giving them insights, teaching them something. And they need to be practical solutions. They need to be executable. So you need to align with procurement's pressure points. We talked about insights and values, practical solutions. You need data-backed flexibility. It's not enough to say, we can be flexible, we can help you meet your demands. We can come up with another process. We can come up with another framework for the contract. You've got to provide data to help them justify this. Then it's about control tools and transparency, and give them internal credibility. Don't play games with procurement because they can spot it really, really quickly. Or if you do get away with it for a time, you don't want to be in a position where procurement's trying to play catch up because they feel slighted that you haven't been open and honest with them. Your reputation is absolutely key to them having confidence in you. Sales needs to act as a stabilizer, the voice of clarity in the chaos. And that's about humanizing procurement because they feel exposed, unsure, and under scrutiny. And you need to actually bring clarity, not noise, simplicity, not spin, and be the person that they can trust to make the complexity manageable. Absolutely key for them. Now, budgets have been constrained, budgets have been cut, spend has been delayed. And as a salesperson, you need to challenge the myth that there's no budget. There's the opportunity to redirect the existing budget. And that's redirection of funds. How do you take existing funds and put them to higher, better use that delivers more value to the organization? Quantify the cost of delays of decisions. Many companies take very, very short-term perspectives. They're looking to address the quarter, the next results being published, and instead sacrifice the long-term health of the organization. So that's why it's imperative that you demonstrate the expense of inaction. Provide them with ROI models, and Todd is expert at this. Show them how they can justify the sales decision, the spend, and give them the tools, models, and communications to be able to convey that into the organization with credibility. And then solution as a strategic enabler for the business. Not enough people do that. It's about, oh, okay, it's procurement. We're going to sell a product or a service. I can't tell you how many salespeople will come in and see a procurement person and start extolling the virtues of their product, why it's the best thing and why they should buy it, instead of trying to solve for what the problem is. And I know that's motherhood and apple pie to sales organizations. You go in, you identify the customer's problem, you understand it and show how your solution matches up against it. Somehow, when salespeople get in front of procurement, most of them forget that learning and forget that the procurement organization has problems that is looking to solve as well and to help them with that. So in order to be successful, you need to reframe your value proposition. You need to expand from a cost focus to an outcome focus. So look at the total cost of ownership, which is the full cost view over time. You'll see some procurement organizations look at it from a price times volume equation. They're typically what I refer to as purchasing organizations. As you move up the chain from purchasing to strategic sourcing to category management, value becomes more important as part of the equation for them. So very important you look at total cost of ownership, look at the outcomes, in terms of linking them to results that procurement can point to, and then demonstrate your value. Show it's a good deal, even at a premium cost, because of the value that's being delivered. Don't be afraid to make that case, because as much as procurement is hitting on you to reduce the costs as much as possible, they're also sensitive to, is this going to cost more in the short, medium, long term? And how's that going to reflect on me at the end of the day? So we talked about anchoring every cost to an outcome. You need to demonstrate measurable ROI. It's got to be concrete. You've got to remove any ambiguity. You've got to show them how they can implement effectively. And this is one of the things I find sales teams tend to overlook in their dialogues with procurement. They come in with a solution, they believe passionately and can demonstrate that it's better than the alternative. They miss out on what is the implications for implementation. What are the change costs, how they handle those? And you need to be very proactive in engaging with procurement to address that. And then speed to value, show that they don't have to wait 12 months for the value to be delivered. It's really important to understand what the internal rate of return is that finance measures projects by, and show that you can at least beat that. I know in organizations that I've been in, if there's been a proposal for a new spend or an increased spend, it's always measured against the yardstick of, can we get the return on investment within the current business year? Not even 12 months, within the current business year. Does it have a positive rate of return? So be very mindful of that. That's a mindset they have. One of the approaches to expanding business is to come in with a right-size solution. So the trick here is to start small. De-risk the decision. Make it very palatable for the organization, addressing just the immediate needs they have. And then design for modularity. Make it easy to grow. There's components they can bolt on as they need them. And then plan for the scale. Develop a long-term vision with procurement and the customer for how this will roll out once the economic tide turns positive again. Innovation. One of the things that happens during times of economic uncertainty is innovation becomes deprioritized against risk. And it's back to being the safe option. So you need to unlock this resistance, and you need to show that by actually adopting the innovative approach, you're giving them a safe solution. It's safer than the status quo. It's going to meet their needs. So it has to be positioned as giving them lower exposure than the existing solutions they have, or there's going to be a natural resistance to sticking their neck out. And back to that statistic of over 70% of chief procurement officers reporting that the need to avoid mistakes is actually increasing in their organizations. ESG, make it a strategic differentiator. Just because the priority is on cost doesn't mean that organizations don't still have their commitments to their ESG goals. And I know certain organizations are revising those, but there's plenty out there that still have public statements around ESG. And you need to lead with proof. Avoid greenwashing. It stands out really quickly and it kills your credibility. You have to show evidence. You need to highlight compliance and how your reporting is going to make their job easier. And then really, really important, and it helps in the cost argument, demonstrate how value is delivered through the ESG programs, whether that's cost saving or risk reduction. And then emphasize the reputational gains, that it will make them look good internally and externally if they go with your solution because it fits with their ESG goals. Let's get to working with procurement. You need to win by working with them proactively. Waiting doesn't help you at all. You need to be proactive. You need to be outcome orientated. You need to collaborate effectively with them. And collaboration is not a soft term. It's a strategic push. And Todd's mentioned on many occasions, you can achieve an awful lot by working with procurement. And they're under pressure to save cost, to deliver the supplies, to be effective and not make mistakes. At the same time, they're dealing with this inflationary economy, these supply constraints and everything else. Your ability to come in and help them, support them, is real value for the procurement team and will lead them to champion you. We talked about outcome focused. It's got to be there. It's critical. And offering flexibility. What are the different approaches you can take? How can you structure the contracts differently? How do you structure your payment in terms of milestones and delivery? How do you change the processes that you're adopting to make it more effective for procurement and less costly for them to transact with you? Absolutely critical. And then lastly, give them the internal tools. If there's one thing that drives me nuts, let me describe the situation for you. Procurement people tend to shift from categories of expenditure as their careers progress. And they have to learn a new category as they move into that area. And there's a learning curve. And loads of people trying to influence them, loads of history in their own company as to about how things should be done. There are very, very few companies, suppliers out there that provide buyer guides to help the procurement folks navigate through that process. And to be effective, a buyer guide has to be neutral, unbiased, and factual. And honestly, the suppliers that get the best credibility are the ones that point out the areas where they're not proficient, as well as the ones where they are, and why they're still a good choice. But that honesty really resonates with procurement. And that leads us on to the necessity of building a business case that's robust. It's not enough to have the value. You've got to help procurement sell it internally, because procurement are going into a closed door meeting with finance and the stakeholders, making recommendations on behalf of cross-functional teams. And they need to have a comprehensive, effective value business case to present to finance. And you need to be confident that they can represent you effectively, even though you're not in the room. And that's really the preview to the next episode, because Todd's going to walk you through how to make those business cases that get greenlit. And I invite you to reflect, what internal tools are you currently providing today to help your procurement counterparts be successful in championing you as a solution? That's the main body. This is me and my contact details. I am now working with sales teams, trying to help them understand the procurement perspective, how to actually engage effectively with procurement teams, the different type of procurement teams, the different kind of procurement personas. So welcome any dialogue there. That being said, Bruce, I think we're open to any questions people may have.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I had a curiosity, Dean. Just based on your experience, what % of sellers show up and help shape that business case once it gets to procurement?
10% or less. 10% or less. Seriously. Most do the bid, drop it with procurement, have an indication that they got the business, maybe get into contractual negotiations, which is a whole other nightmare and can be easily fixed. But they don't help build the business case to sell the proposition in. A lot of the time that's procurement's fault. They don't engage the sales team to come on board. But again, sales needs to be proactive in offering that to the procurement organization.
Well, and Dean, another question: what % of deals for procurement to approve require a business case, even before this period of economic uncertainty?
It's driven by size, but generally anything over about 500,000 will require a business case. And typically $1 million and up are landing on the CFO's table, and procurement's expected to actually signal whether they approve or not. So there's organizations I've worked for where the CFO would not approve a deal unless I personally endorsed it. If it was coming across his desk, I had to give the green light to it. So the lesson there is sales teams that think it's really cool to try and work around procurement, they are going to find it's a very tough road. I would tell you in about 90% of the cases with the CFOs where I've had to give approval, if I haven't had my approval, the project doesn't go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had mentioned to me that if you say no, there's a 10% chance that might move forward, 90% chance that it's dead on the vine right at that point. And so interesting that 1 out of 10 sellers actually help shape the business case that carries that internal dialogue. That's pre this period of economic uncertainty. I'm hoping some of the sharper sellers might realize, gosh dang, and you said before that, even before this period, such a high percentage of deals require a business case, especially over a certain number internally, whatever that rate might be. But only 1 out of 10 sellers is doing that. So there's a huge gap there in helping buyers buy.
Even at the 10%, Bruce, not all of those are demonstrating the value. They're just helping with the cost times the volume, maybe TCO, total cost of ownership, as a criteria. But what they're not doing is demonstrating the full value proposition to the organization.
Yeah. So anyways, huge gaping opportunity even before this period. Now that we're in times of economic uncertainty, and then Dean just laid out, what is that response, especially with the cost-oriented focus. How can sellers show up and do a better job of that? And Todd, I know you're going to just really lay heavy into that in our next webinar series. And again, for everybody out here listening, if you need to get that job done, no better guy to bring to that knife fight than Todd, I must say. But Todd, I'm sure you've got questions too. You've been thinking about David as well. If you've got any questions to kind of fire at Dean.
And we've all got different industry experience, but when Dean said 10% show up with a business case, my experience is 90% of those I could drive a truck through. They're so bad. And I've got a list because Sharon 3 weeks. So I hate to say what not to do, but that just because it's a business case doesn't mean it's a believable one. It's accurate, and the customer feels confident taking it up there. I've seen one. I won't get into it. Spelling mistakes and the like. So that's one comment. And then this is going back a while ago, Bruce, but my colleagues would say the customer never asked for a business case. Okay, terminology is different in every company. Do they ask for justification? Is there a budget threshold? I mean, ask the question in different ways. Would it help you get the approval for this if I brought you a business need or something? Because they might not come to you. The bid didn't say we needed this, so why should I do it? I'm like, go in your own company and ask for $1 million and not have to write a business case. I want to come work for you, because odds are your boss is going to ask you why. And if you come in and say, because I like the guy and he's fun, probably not a good enough answer to get $1 million.
You bet.
Yeah, the thing I'd add on to that, Todd, is a lot of times when the budget's been formulated, the stakeholder will talk with a given supplier to try and build the budget up. And that becomes de facto the business case that they run with throughout the whole project. And even if that supplier isn't successful, nobody's proactively going back, or very few people are proactively going back to the winner of the process to say, help me justify this and show me where the value is coming from. And that there's an interesting corporate executive board statistic which showed that deals that weren't tended to or managed effectively lost 75% of their value over 2 years. Whereas those where people actually try to realize the value, work it, and drive the whole process forward, saw a 25% increase in value over the original value proposition.
Helping the customer get the value, the success is more than just, here's the business case. Thanks for the order. See you around, because you better have flexibility when you come back the next time.
And this is an area where both procurement and sales have to do a lot better, because they're always chasing the next opportunity, the next project, and they need to spend more time on the ones that they've actually delivered to realize that value, because from the sales perspective, that can lead to a lot more sales.
For sure.
Hey, Dean, we do have a question. Sebastian, thanks for asking it in the chat. But Sebastian, or I'll read your question. Dean, you mentioned that there is risk aversion when there is economic uncertainty. How do procurement teams weigh up the pain of change, cost, and their associated risks when making decisions?
Okay, thanks for that, Seb. Basically, what we're looking at is, what is the actual cost to affect the change? What is the time? Costing also includes the internal resources, the amount of focus it will take away from other opportunities. How could we have used those resources elsewhere? And then what is the likelihood of the project actually failing or not delivering against the benefits that it's supposed to realize for us as an organization? And procurement will certainly spend a lot of time trying to appraise that. And we'll do so with a very skeptical eye. They're looking to disprove things as part of the acid test for the supplier. Will it actually deliver what we expect it to deliver?
I love it. Yeah, and we'll speak towards our third part of this webinar series, but around the buying experience. It doesn't end with signing the contract. It's delivering that value. And especially in times of economic uncertainty, you want to grow that value within your existing client base. Make sure they're getting the value. Yeah. So, and many miss that memo. Yeah.
One of the things sales teams tend to miss is procurement is really plugged into the organization and knows what's going on. And if you've been successful with them, if you've helped them achieve their goals, if you understand them and align with them, they're much more inclined to identify opportunities that you haven't realized in their organization to increase the value to you as an organization.
Yeah, Dean, I'd mentioned to you in one of our previous calls that, I had, and David had the honor of being, on a vendor of record for Alcatel-Lucent, but because of our winning streak and value streak for them, and also working with procurement on that, making sure our deals got approved and into play for the organization, that one of the heads of procurement became a friend, and if something was moving in the account that we weren't involved with, chances are we'd get invited to it. So it was a blind spot for us. But procurement very often would help us be invited to the table because they knew there was an initiative, and that buyer for that initiative wasn't considering all the best players, and hence we'd get invited to the table.
So here's an interesting stat that sales really, really needs to absorb. Procurement is typically 67% of the way through the process before they contact suppliers. So it's imperative that you have a proactive relationship with them that's actively managed so that you get insight as to what's going on earlier in the process. Because by then we've researched the suppliers, we've understood the market, we've framed our specifications, and you've missed all these opportunities to help shape the bid documents, the selection criteria, and the outcome.
Dean, I have a question for you. I'm hearing from some of my clients that customers are looking to consolidate the number of suppliers.
Yep.
And they're wondering, like, how do I get to be that supplier? What's driving my customers' behavior towards that consolidation? Do you have any insight into what's going on there?
Totally. This is a lot about managing tail spend, concentrating power into a select number of suppliers in exchange for economic advantage. So if you take a typical benchmark of a couple of years ago, it was benchmark was about 5,000 suppliers per $1 billion worth of spend. Best in class was somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 vendors. It's not uncommon to come across organizations per $1 billion of spend with 25,000 suppliers. So that's one of the drivers: reduce the tail spend, concentrate it in exchange for better terms, both for the customer and increased revenues for the supplier. But to do that, you need to become as much as possible a one-stop shop within that category. What are all the services, products, capabilities that you can bring to that relationship in order to be successful? It's not just about sacrificing your pricing to come in and win the business. It's much more than that. And if I can, there's a fallacy around e-auctions. If you do get dragged into an e-auction, the assumption is that the lowest price is going to win. Any good sourcing organization, that's just one of the points of reference. They're looking at the quality, they're looking at assurance of supply, innovation, all these other criteria, as well as what the price is in order to come up with the right solution. So in periods of consolidation of suppliers, it's very real. Be proactive, go out there, show them how you can pick up more of the business with the right terms, the right service, the right quality. And there's nothing wrong. It might not happen a lot of the time, but there's nothing wrong in actually asking the buyer for what the spend data is. What is out there? What is the size of the opportunity? Where else are they spending money with what suppliers that you could actually come in and provide those goods and services for them?
Thank you, Dean. Hey, everybody, we just got a couple minutes left as part of our scheduled time together. Any other questions? This has been such a great dialogue.
I'm surprised I haven't raised the issue of consultants yet, Bruce.
You want to talk about that for a little bit? I know that's a hot one, probably something people aren't thinking about.
As consultancies are seeing challenges to their other books of business, they are increasing their forays into the procurement world. We are seeing compound annual growth rates between 8 to 14% as they're out there recruiting procurement folks, building their capabilities. And they're pitching typically into finance or to the CEO, promising cost savings and driving those. And I've worked with some excellent organizations, consultancies doing procurement projects. And I've worked with some that are just interested in slashing the cost come what may, because the way the contract is set up is on a share of savings. And I've always considered that to be really, really dangerous, because the propensity to just go for the lowest cost rather than what serves the long-term interests of the client can be very detrimental. So the way to counter that is, again, get back to the value argument, empower procurement, be proactive. If they're able to show that they're making the progress, that they're delivering against the expectations of the organization, and you're part of the solution, you've positioned yourself well. If you find yourself in the middle of a consultant program, the same still holds true. Demonstrate the value, articulate it, work with procurement and even with the consultants to demonstrate that value to them.
Sounds good. Any last question, Todd or David, as well, to round out?
I guess maybe it's more for the sales side, so we'll leave it for a few weeks. But it's amazing. We all have a CRM system, whether it's Outlook. Well, maybe it's a better way to put it. How many salespeople come back in 6 months and check? I thought the solution was going to bring this value to you. Let's find out what it's realizing. And how many say goodbye? I mean, 25 years ago, you could have that capability, but today, everybody's got it, even a sticky note. Call back my good customer and see how I did.
Very, very few is the answer, Todd. It's an incredibly low percentage. And I think that's structural to both procurement and the sales teams. There is a focus within procurement of supplier management, supplier development, and how does that go forward? But they're so resource constrained. There's few organizations that can do that to the extent that they want. And the sales team's under the gun to keep delivering more revenue and achieve their targets, which makes it hard for them to look back. But as we said, that's how you can really expand the revenue stream with your existing customer, which is a lot easier than going out and acquiring a new customer, for fair sake, and really building that value case for them. And the suppliers that do that are unfortunately too few and far between for my liking. But it's a two-way street. You can't say it's the sales team's fault. It's also the customer's fault as well. They've got to invest the resources in fully realizing that value. I can tell you, out of the companies I worked for, only one engaged a formal look back process to make sure that the projects actually delivered the value and the rate of return that was put into the initial business case.
Yeah.
It's
Which is crazy.
Crazy because more and more businesses are going to this customer success, or I'll pay you based on value. And all I heard from some salespeople before was, we're not sure our solution will deliver the value, so I don't want to go back and measure it.
Yeah.
You talked about before, they just made up a number and gave it to somebody. It's like, if it's not realizing the value, it's probably, I hate to use the term, an easy fix. We, change that or upgrade that or do that. And the businesses that bought the solution, they got the value, they were usually easier to meet with. And then back to procurement saying, I talked to your team, this is what they said the value was.
So one of the things that's really tough is procurement will come in and demonstrate, okay, this is the value, these are the cost savings if they're looking to drop money down to the bottom line. What happens is the budget holder typically takes that money and spends it on something else. And at the end of the year, finance is turning around to procurement and saying, well, where the hell is all this value that you delivered? Because we can't see it anywhere. And then you have to go through convoluted mechanisms to actually capture the cost and the cost savings and drop it to the bottom line, which doesn't do wonders for procurement's relationship with the internal stakeholders. But it's rare for me to see other departments within your organization take up that baton and run with it.
Well, you guys, on that note, I know we'll talk more about that. How do we get this sitting right, especially for the vendors that want to win more and more often and keep their valuable clients and grow those valuable clients? I know our next session is just going to be really rich in that regard. So we've hit the procurement perspective. Dean, thank you so much for helping us understand the internal dynamics, how the buyer's minds work, what changes in times of economic uncertainty. Todd, I know you're totally going to deliver on how do we show up now? How do we partner with the client, with the people on the buyer side, put that energy into, setting up the business case, measuring for it, getting that time to first impact scheduled and agreed to, and how we're going to measure it, and proving value so we can grow that value for that account and grow our business, our revenue number. So that's going to be super critical. And then we'll, again, our third one in June, we'll round out with how do we drive an overall value experience that our buyers are just going to love and make us the vendor of choice. So anyways, on that note, thank you everybody for showing up. Dean, thanks so much for the energy you put into your presentation. And Todd and David, thanks for your wisdom and shaping this whole thing and getting us underway. So I'll go ahead and end the session now. We'll send a recording out to everybody and some bonus materials as well. And then we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much. Have a great day. This session gave us a powerful look at how decisions get made inside complex buying organizations. We heard about the internal tug-of-war procurement faces, the risk aversion that's growing across the board, and the massive opportunity for sellers who can help build a clear, defensible business case. This is just the first of 3 sessions in our Revenue Mastery series. Next up, the Business Case Advantage with Todd Snelgrove, where we'll break down exactly how to win executive buy-in without defaulting to price cuts. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to the Value Pro Show. And if you're feeling kind, leave a review so others can find and enjoy it too. Thanks for watching. Wishing you success.